So now we're going to set up lighting render elements for our scene. As with the multimats, these require some preparation in Maya to set up correctly. And I'm going to show a couple of things that might trip you up with mesh lights. We'll also see some of the limitations of this process. And further info can be found at this link below. I'm not going to read the whole link out, but basically it's worth reading the Chaos Group documentation for these elements, either before or after watching the next clip. So I will see you in Maya. So here we are in our lampshade free version of our scene. Apart from removing the lampshade, it's essentially identical to the end of the last module. Now we have all our beauty passes here, and of course we can render the other layers with our AO and our mats. Now let me show you how I've laid out the lights here. Here we have a group for our lights. Now it has three of the lights: the moonlight, which is an area light, a fill light, which just kind of adds a bit of extra light here to light up this part of the scene, an HDRI light, which just gives you some more interesting refractions and reflections. I believe that's probably contributing quite a bit to the noise though, so we'll need to up the samples on that. Now the lamp itself is not in the group because it's a practical light essentially. So within the lamp you have the bulb holder, the bulb. Now when I put the lampshade on, I just use the light sphere and I switch the bulb geometry off and I switch this filament geometry off. But when I'm not using the lampshade, I have the filament, and if we look at the actual bulb itself, a bit bigger, so you can see we do actually have a filament there. And the filament is what is called a mesh light. So I've selected you can select the filament, and within Maya you can right click here, you can turn selection into light. Now having done that, you get this light mesh here, so that goes down into there. What we want to do is now put this into render elements. So let's go to our render settings, go to our render elements tab, and what we want to do is find the light select element and add, we have one for the moonlight, fill light, HDRI and lamp. So we have 4 lights. So now let's just name them. So we'll start with the moonlight, and we'll do the same with the lamp light. And then of course we have our fill, and we have our HDRI, our dome light. If I now just hit render, this is not enough to actually create the light select elements. We'll get our render as before. We have light selects, we have them all there, but there's nothing in them. And that's because it has no way of knowing which lights are meant to be there. Naming them the same is a good practice, a good workflow. You want to keep things tidy and names that make sense to a human operator, but that's not enough to tell V-Ray which light goes where. So in order to do that, we actually need to open a new menu, which is in Windows, Relationship Editors, Sets. So a set is exactly what you may imagine. A set goes in one thing, and for each of our light selects, these have become an empty set. So we want to put stuff into that set. We can actually drag them from the outliner, or from the right hand side of the sets menu we can select them. So for example, if I find my lights group, and so in my fill light select I can do that, and I can press plus, and that will add the fill light to that. Unfortunately I've also somehow brought the HDRI in there by mistake, so I will just undo that. But there we go. So we can also just drag them from the outliner. So I can go into here, find my, let's do the moonlight, and I'm going to do the lamplight last, and there's a reason for that. So Just grab it. You can't always grab it as easily as you think, but there you go. And we have the HDRI. Let's grab that guy, drag it over there, and there we have it. That's all of them except for the lamp light. Now, we said that the filament is actually a light, so we'll try dragging that in, and then we'll hit render. I may pause the recording while it does render.